For our COBT community, it's Maynard, Mike, and Jeff here with something really exciting, very special. We're really pumped for this one. Nancy Jacobson and Ryan Clancy from No Labels are joining us. Nancy is the founder and CEO. Ryan is the chief strategist. If you're tuned in at all to what's going on with No Labels, it's a very well-regarded organization that has been pushing cooperation and centrism and good ideas in Washington for quite a long time. But more recently, they have talked about the potential of putting a candidate, a third party, or a third choice on the ballot in 24 for president. And that is getting a lot of reactions, which make this thing really, really interesting. So Nancy and Ryan, thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to have you guys.
Great to be here.
Likewise. Well, before we jump in, Mike, what would you tell all of us about what's happening in the market?
Well, Maynard, today the markets are looking up, but I think there's a couple events that we're looking at here over the next day or two and the remainder of the week. The first one is economically. Tomorrow is going to be the FOMC meeting. Most people expect that the Fed's going to raise rates by 25 basis points. And as you all know, it really comes down to what Powell says in this press release, what the FOMC meeting minutes say to determine, not what July's hike is going to be, but what is August hike. Are they going to hike again in August? Right now, most people don't think they're going to hike in August. They think this is going to be last. So it's really going to set the tone for the bond markets and maybe the equity markets tomorrow. So that's the first one on an economic standpoint. From a crude oil standpoint, what you've seen here over the last couple of weeks is really crude oil has gotten a bid. Today we're around $79.50 to almost $80 a barrel on WTI. That's the first time we've been at this range in a long time. And to kind of put that in perspective, this is the first time that we're above the 200-day moving average in almost a year. So from that standpoint, that's brought a lot of technical traders back into the market to cover. We've been talking about time spreads being in backwardation for many, many weeks. They're getting more deeply into backwardation. And what that's kind of telling you right now is the market is getting physically tight. Another thing we'd say here is that the market sentiment has really shifted here over the last couple weeks. As you all know, over the last, say, 2 or 3 months, crude oil's been going sideways, really haven't had any direction, and now it's moving up. And the reason that is because the market has been really worried about these demand factors. Second half, U.S. Recession. Right now, the market's really shifted into a soft landing scenario, and now the market is really starting to think about what's supply going to look like in the second half. And from that standpoint, OPEC has taken a lot of barrels off the market, so we're going to be in a deficit of maybe 2 million and maybe as high as 3 million barrels. So you're going to see a lot of draws in the second half of this year. So the market sentiment has shifted from demand concerns to supply concerns. And guess what? Better market to be in when OPEC is adding barrels as opposed to OPEC taking barrels out of the market. So totally different structure, totally different setup. The last thing we'd say is just, is really the broader markets. Interesting stat, I had to look at it today. Today is the 12th day that Dow is going to be up consecutively. The record is, all-time record is 13 days in a row. So we're approaching the all-time record for the Dow to be up on consecutive days. The last time we were up 13 days, that was months before the 1987 market crash. So that's concerning. Now, what I do like about what's going on with the market right now, the market's been led by technology, which is up 45% year to date. AI stocks, everyone knows that. What we've had here recently is the market is starting to broaden out, meaning like utilities, energy, consumer staples, stuff of that nature, healthcare, financials are now starting to perform. The market's broadening out to these other sectors, and that's a really positive thing. Last thing we'd say is just energy stocks. As you know, in the last week or so, energy has really been about the big 3 oil service companies and Liberty reporting their results. And obviously activity levels are down, but pricing is the one thing is holding both domestically and international. What we're going to see this week is just a lot of different companies. We're talking alternative energy, leading solar companies. We're going to be talking about 2 of the oil majors. Anybody and everybody thing in the oil service. We're talking onshore U.S., offshore, mid-cap, small-cap names. And now we're going to get the natural gas levered E&Ps this week. So it's going to be a really broad-based energy Q2 earnings results this week. So we should have a better feel over the next 48, 72 hours of how energy is sort of unfolding, what the outlook is in the second half of 2023. So with that, Maynard, we'll hand it back to you.
Great. Okay. Well, let's jump in with Nancy and Ryan. Nancy, maybe start with you. So many people in our community are familiar with No Labels, have been, getting to know it, following it. It's been quite. We saw you in the spring of 22. I think you were in Houston. Joe Manchin was in town. It's been quite a year plus for you as you have started thinking about this idea of potentially giving us a third choice for president. How's it feel? What are you working on? I know you're a lot of news, a lot of interviews, a lot of excitement. Tell us about how it feels to you right now at No Labels.
Well, thank you, Maynard. The big mission that we need to do is to get the ballot line so that we're in a position to offer the ballot to a unity ticket if the public wants it, right? I mean, all of this is based on the public. Right now, we see the polls. People don't want a Trump-Biden matchup. And if this still continues, then being in a position to offer the ballot to a ticket so that they can take this ballot and go off and run on this line.
So maybe just to help us understand the mechanics, I guess as we understand it, you're literally going state by state trying to get this line on the ballot, and that requires signatures and approvals, and it's a process in each state. Do you mind telling us how many states you've got, or just give us a sense for the progress you've made with that?
I mean, so far there's 5. We're starting very early. So most times, back in the day, Ross Perot started March of the election year. So our effort, it starts very, very early here. But we're in motion in 20 plus states for this year. And those are really the states that we can get this year. And then, just staying focused and as we move forward and try to get this, the petition signed for each of these states.
And just a mechanical question, I guess that requires you to have people in each state, and it also requires money and signatures. Like how hard is it? How expensive is it? How do you get this done?
Well, it's just a lot of tedious work. It can be done. It's having people on the ground, getting these signatures. Every state has different requirements, so it's paying attention, having good lawyers. But it's tedious, but it's all doable. It's a constitutional and civil right, so you ultimately, end up getting this because it's a right in this country to be able to have another choice and another option.
And is it made more difficult by the fact that you don't have the candidate yet, or does that really not matter because you're just trying to get the?
Yeah, at this point in time, it does not matter. And what we've been hearing from the people on the ground, and it's hundreds of thousands of people that have already signed this, it's the easiest signature to get. You don't have to do a lot of explaining because people just instinctively know they want another choice. So it's the zeitgeist, at the moment here, right? I mean, it's the national zeitgeist. People don't want the choices. People are hungry. So there's a lot of enthusiasm. It's a very easy signature to get. Lots of enthusiasm.
Ryan, let me pull you in here. You're the chief strategist. What are the things you're watching and thinking about? I know you guys are, responding to a lot of things that are happening here, but what's on your mind?
Well, I mean, our focus has really been singular since the beginning, which is what does the public want? And it's been so obvious since we started doing this for well over a year ago that they're not happy with their choices that they're likely to get in 24 and that they want more voices in the process. I mean, this is part of the reason why last week in New Hampshire, we released our common sense policy booklet, because it was so obvious that not just that the public was dissatisfied with candidates they're likely to get, but when they think about the issues they care about, those issues either don't get addressed, or if they do get addressed, they get addressed in this very cartoonish, black, white, good, evil way that oversimplifies a lot of very complicated debates. And that's not how the public thinks about it. There's a lot more shades of gray out there, which the public is very comfortable with, and which our political system just doesn't allow at all.
So you mentioned the common sense document that you guys put out. I've got a couple labels on some things I was maybe going to bring up around energy and other things, but would you mind telling us a little bit about how you produced it? Like, what was you get everybody together and you iron out the language, but you had to put your own philosophy to work, which is bipartisanship and consensus and, okay, what are we saying? You mind just telling us how you produced this document?
Sure. So we've had a team working on it for months, but the genesis of it really was conversations and surveys we've done over the last year and a half of tens of thousands of people to help understand what do they care about? What are their aspirations for the country? What are their concerns? We must have tested 100 different policy priorities, issues, combinations. And what you just sort of shared earlier, the booklet, we netted out in 30 ideas, common sense ideas that we're very confident most Americans can rally around. So this booklet is, in essence, this is where most Americans want the country to go on most issues. And so we don't prescribe exactly how to get there in every case, but we think it provides a direction. And now what we want is for candidates to really compete and share their vision for how to get to where the common sense majority wants the country to go.
Yeah, guys, I was looking at sort of this document you put out, and one of the things that struck me was civics. Having the population, educated in civics, and it seems to me now, you wouldn't know with like the last presidential election the amount of votes, but it seems like a lot of people are just tired of the system. They don't want to vote. And I think that's a civics breakdown, to be quite honest with you. So maybe expand on that point and how we can do that and how we can make the process better, not only for 24, but maybe the next 2 or 3 elections.
Yeah, I mean, the reason that idea was in there is, one, it's something that the public strongly supported. But two, as we looked at the trend lines that are troubling, is there is such a lack of knowledge about the rights and responsibilities of citizenship. And I think that's directly correlated to something else, which is patriotism. A lot of pollsters have been asking a version of a question of, are you extremely proud to live in America, or are you disappointed to live in America? And those measures of national pride are lower than they've ever been, particularly among young people. And that is a direct result of people's dissatisfaction with the political system and their belief that it just doesn't represent the things they care about. It doesn't work, and it just drives a lot of cynicism. And so we think it's so important to actually make sure kids in high school just learn about some of these foundational things, because most don't. Most states do not have requirements in their curriculum these days to have civics education.
And Ryan, you mentioned the word cynicism just there, and I had that written on my piece of paper as well, and that kind of rules the day. It feels like in the way the public perceives the political arena now. Nancy, maybe talk a little bit about what are some of the I can think of a variety of kind of cynical reactions people would have to a middle ground organization. Maybe trying to put someone perceiving you guys as trying to put your thumb on the scale with regards to elections. How do you think about just that instinctual cynical reaction to anything political that the public has, and how do you talk about what you guys are doing in a positive way?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think the groups in DC have the cynical, they're protecting their turf. So all of this spin up is coming from the groups in DC. The public is aligned with this, right? The public is not happy with the 2 choices. We see it in every poll out there imaginable. And the system has produced, it looks likely that the system is going to produce 2 choices that the public doesn't want. And that's what we're responding to. That was always the bet we made. So I would really try to separate this. There's the groups, in DC. The groups, this is called billions of dollars that these groups, are expending. There's a whole network of these groups. And, that's what's putting the fear of God in these groups, that they don't want to do anything that's going to disrupt their power, their control. So I'm less concerned about the public. It's not the public. I don't see it coming from the public. Ryan, I don't know what you think.
Yeah, well, this is something I'm sure most Americans intuitively get this. But, as bad as our political system is, it is very good for some very powerful interests, meaning there are some very powerful interests that get clicks, that get campaign donations, that fundraise. I mean, one of the things, if you think about a lot of the advocacy organizations that exist in Washington, and they're sending out an email every day about the crisis, about whatever problem they care about. Well, if that problem actually got solved, then they wouldn't have anything to do tomorrow. So there's a real benefit from creating this sense of permanent crisis. And, unfortunately, No Labels is in a lot of ways disrupting that business model. We're saying, there actually is a different way to do this. We don't have to be at each other's throats every day. We could actually come together for the good of the country. The public wants that. The groups don't.
And I think also that I don't know if the groups understand, No Labels will never run a ticket. No Labels is just a group that's, using our democracy to get this choice, our constitutional, our civil right. That's all we're doing. Right? Nobody has identified a ticket. There's been no ticket announced. That's why it's very difficult to understand, is it a spoiler or not? Because you don't even know who the ticket is. You don't even know what party is on top or what party is on bottom. But what these groups in Washington are doing, and right now it's on the Democratic side, very soon it will be the Republicans as well, once it's congealed who their nominee is they are stopping the ability for the American people to have choice. And so you've got to scratch your head and think about that for a moment. That's something different here. I mean, to stop the ability for the public to have choice.
So one thing I was looking, your document is so well written and it's so interesting, and everybody please who gets this, you can also read it pretty quickly. It's so worth the read. But one of your foundational beliefs is we care more about our country than any political party. And that seems so basic and so straightforward, but yet, it's one of the things that causes a little controversy, I guess. Are you surprised? I've been surprised that the parties don't seem to have had a moment of reflection here and said, No Labels has all this momentum and there's all this excitement about what they're doing because we're not doing our jobs. We're not doing well. We're not talking about policies. We are difficult and flame throwing, and maybe we need to improve. Is it behind the scenes? Are they saying that? Because publicly they just seem to be saying No Labels is going to divide the vote and be a spoiler, and they're really not saying anything positive in public as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obvious, right? It does, Maynard. It is actually astounding, right? I mean, they are spending all their time. Some of these groups, they're working every single day to try to figure out a way to discredit us, to disparage us, and to try to crush us. I mean, instead of figuring out, how do you get Joe Biden's poll numbers up? How do you get more people to like him? And it's not our job to do that, right? And Ryan?
Well, there's two things that a lot of the groups, and look, this is a coordinated effort. There's a big piece written about a month ago that there were a lot of operatives who met in DC with the explicit intent to just undermine No Labels and our efforts to get on the ballot. So there's two things these groups could have done that they didn't even think about doing. And it says a lot about how Washington works. So number one is all the people that are attacking us, we've offered to brief them. We said, hey, look, we don't think you're really quite understanding what we're doing and why. And we want to walk you through this. And they had opportunities to get briefings. And after we briefed them, if they said, we still disagree with you and we want to say so publicly, that'd be fine. But they didn't even take us up on the offer of the briefing, which tells you a lot, which is, you know what, we don't really care what you say. We just want to attack you so we can fundraise off it. The other thing is, it seems at no point do any of the people attacking us say, wait a minute, maybe the problem isn't no labels. Maybe the problem is us. Maybe our own behavior and our policies is what's creating the opening for no labels in the first place. And if we reoriented how we behaved and the kind of candidates and policies we put forth, there would never be an opening for a group like No Labels to offer up our ballot and potentially put a ticket on.
Do you think of what you're doing in a way, because if you read the document, it sort of seems like what you might call a conservative Democrat would say, or what a moderate Republican would say. Like it is this middle centrist type thing. We've talked forever about how flawed the primaries are, because they give the advantage to sort of the extreme candidates in both parties. That what you're doing is kind of creating a third primary for the middle of America to speak up and say who they would like to see be president. Is that really the problem is not just the parties, right? It's how the parties choose their candidates, which is particularly seems to be the problem.
No, I mean, these primaries, such a small fraction of the public participates in these primaries. I mean, across the board. I mean, Ryan may have the exact numbers, but that is a problem that, the citizens of this country, we could have different candidates if people would show in the primary. Now, unfortunate, nobody, I don't think there's anybody of great stature is trying to primary Biden. So the entire Democratic Party is going to stick with him, and he's going to stay there. So that's it. But it's this small group of folks that get into the primaries, and that's why the choices we get. And so to have the freedom to really appeal to the common sense majority in a general contest, that's what the freedom of a third option will do.
And Maynard, the consequence of what Nancy's talking about is because all these candidates are limited by what they can say by the primaries, it limits the debate we can have on issues. So again, if you start going through the issues that we highlight in the book, so you're talking about energy and immigration, the limits of the debate we're allowed to have is what the primary voters on the Democratic and Republican side will accept. That doesn't remotely reflect how most people feel about most issues. Now, look, let's take the issue your community cares about a lot, energy and the climate. The view of the public is so clear on this. They do want clean air and clean water, and they care about climate change. It's a concern of theirs. However, they do not want to shut down access to our energy resources here in America before we're ready, because they think two things. One, it's just going to jack up prices for me and my family without doing much of anything for climate change. And two, it's going to empower dictators abroad. Now, that view, which to most Americans is common sense, you can't say that in either primary. If in the Republican primary, I have to pretend climate change doesn't exist. And in the Democratic primary, I have to pretend we're going to get rid of fossil fuels 5 years from now. Neither of those things are true. Neither of those things represent how most people feel about the issue. And that's why we think it's so valuable to get out some ideas that aren't limited by what primary voters want or accept.
Yeah, maybe a question is for both of you. It's like, it feels to me like social media is one of the reasons why we have this big divide in voters, just extreme divide. How do you guys, harness social media for your advantage? And how do you think it's going to play here over the next 3, 4, 5 months on how you're thinking about things?
Look, social media is the great benefit of social media is that it lets you go directly to people. And we've got a very active community on Facebook, on Instagram. I will say that Twitter, as platforms go, is a little tougher for us because that tends to be, the loudest, angriest voices on both sides really dominate that. But we right now have the biggest investment out in the field that we've ever made in social media, both in terms of digital ads, both in terms of our citizen engagement. I mean, look, we track, like every group, the kind of engagement we have in a given week. And we're on par with, the NRA on the right, MoveOn.org on the left. I think whatever you think of those groups, I think people would say those have pretty activist communities behind them. So it says to us, if you get this message in front of people, they like it. Now what we got to do is just get that message out.
So from just a subscriber or even the growth that you've seen in people who are looking at your page or people that basically responded to the organization, what are we looking at it from a number standpoint? And maybe where was it, say, 3-6 months ago, maybe 12 months ago, and where do you expect to see it, going forward? And the reason I say that, it seems like every day, every political, piece that you read, any, be it Real Clear Politics, National Review, whatever the case may be, right? Everyone seems to have a story about you every day from both sides. And so it seems to have a lot of momentum here. So just sort of numbers and where you think that's going.
Yeah, I mean, we had our launch of the Common Sense last week. Page views, 175, not page views, but the website coming, over 175,000 people. We've done the best fundraising we've ever done. I mean, this is, this is every week, this is growing exponentially. $70,000 in 1 week with fundraising. I mean, it's getting huge. So the media likes controversy, and some of these groups, right? These groups that are really fearful and very running scared of what we're doing, I think have created this controversy that now creates all this attention, and all this attention has brought people out of the woodwork. I mean, we're growing leaps and bounds, right? So you couldn't have bought all of this free publicity. So the numbers are growing. I would imagine you just keep building and building upon it, right? So it's for the movement. I think people are smart. So, I know this spoil is all over the place, but I think people are smart. They don't like the choices. If we were at another time and people were very happy with the choices, we've never seen anything like this. I mean, the numbers we found a year and a half ago when the first national major 25,000 person poll was sent out, we had never seen numbers in our lifetimes with 59% of the public open to an independent moderate. This never happened before. So we're at a unique American moment. I think everybody sees it, no matter what side you're on. And so creating this controversy, they probably gave us the biggest gift because now the media is covering us and they want the fight.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's the appetite is so obviously there. And that is the one thing that, frankly, some of the people attacking us, I mean, we just don't have an answer for, is they keep saying, well, an independent can never get traction. And we all know historically the reasons why they haven't. On the other hand, the point that basically no one disputes is that in poll after poll, 2/3 of people or more tell you, I don't want a rematch of the 2020 election. So why should it surprise anybody if that's a given that a group like No Labels comes along and says, well, what would you think if maybe we offered you another choice aside from the thing you so obviously don't want? It shouldn't surprise people. There's a real appetite for that, and there is.
Maybe to stay on that thread, as I think about the path for you guys to have an impact. I mean, you talked about just the procedurally, getting on the ballot. How do you think about turning or translating what you both have described in terms of the American public views not being reflected in the election choices? How do you measure success, and what does that look like?
I mean, I look at it a couple different ways. Is for over a decade we've been engaged in one thing. We've been trying to build a common sense majority in America and give a voice to the common sense majority. Now, we've done that a lot of different ways. For most of our first decade, people knew of us because of our work in Congress. We helped create the Problem Solvers Caucus in the House and a group of bipartisan allies in the Senate. And they were the ones that really led the way for passage of major bipartisan legislation. So the infrastructure bill and the CHIPS Act and the rewrite of the Electoral Count Act. So each step of the way, we were given the common sense majority more of a voice. If 6 to 9 months from now, we never offer our ballot line to a ticket. Like there's just not an opening. But our movement's a lot bigger. the issues we put forth, some of them that are in there in the Common Sense Policy booklet, they're in the debate. The two major party nominees feel like they got to answer to them, and they feel like they can't ignore this group of voters anymore. Then that's success for us. That's another step on this journey we've been on to empower the common sense majority and to diminish the influence of the extremes on both sides that everyone seems to agree has a disproportionate influence on our politics.
So one question, Nancy and Ryan, I know this a spoiler type argument gets made that your candidate enters the race, they take from Biden for whatever reason. You hear more about the potential that you take from Biden and then Trump wins. Isn't it the case, the way you've set this up, is you're going to look at this, if you get out into the spring and both parties do seem on course to do Trump and Biden as their nominees, you're going to evaluate your candidate and the possibility, the real viability of the candidate. Like you're not, it's almost by definition, you're not going to launch if your candidate is simply a spoiler. You're going to launch if you think your candidate really has a chance to win. Is that fair?
Absolutely. And we've said it so many times. This is only for a candidate to win, not to spoil. And it's true. You don't know. I mean, I know everybody's pontificating, but nobody knows. I mean, that's really the attack ad. So what people do in the groups in Washington, what they do is they're trying to provoke fear, trying to rile everybody up, and put these thoughts in their head that this is definitely going to spoil it. You just don't know where this goes because you don't know who the candidates are going to be. You don't even know, you don't really know who the Democratic or Republican candidates are going to be. But right now, if it was a Trump-Biden matchup, we see the opening because Trump doesn't have 100% support of his party. He just doesn't. And there's 24 million Republicans that we've modeled that do not want to vote for Trump. And I think that's only going to grow. And they don't want to vote for Biden either. And you have the same problem with Biden. And then you have this growing group of independents that's the largest faction that doesn't have an interest in voting for either.
Maynard, the one thing we do know is we do know historically what a spoiler looks like. And this is where like these groups, they just like to, they think if they just repeat something enough, it just makes it true. A spoiler in our view, and probably the view of most people, is one, a candidate that can't win, and two, a candidate that whatever votes they get are only coming from one side. So Ralph Nader in 2000 got 3% of the vote. And most would probably agree votes for him otherwise probably would have went to Gore. Same thing with Jill Stein in 2016. She got 1% of the vote. Most of those votes came out of Hillary's column. Why? Because those were both left-wing protest candidates. So if you're looking at this cycle and a potential spoiler, Cornel West is a candidate that looks like a spoiler because much like a Nader or a Jill Stein, and by the way, Jill Stein is his campaign manager. That's what a spoiler looks like. And so Nancy really nailed it that throwing the spoiler label at us is just an attempt to demonize us and discredit us. And it's not backed up by anything.
And it's funny you mentioned that. I happened to see something this weekend, probably getting ready to talk to you guys, where David Axelrod was saying what you just said. Like Cornel West is if you want to talk about something that is a significant potential spoiler, it's him.
Yeah.
One question for you. We had this, Jeff had asked about what does success look like. And as you guys were thinking about this, it seems like people not only, the polling data better than us. They not only don't want a Trump-Biden rematch, they don't want it done in the same way, where we have ridiculous debates, debates where people yell at each other, debates where people skip the debate, debates where people don't ask good questions. Like, is there a way, even if we find ourselves in a Trump-Biden rematch, is there any chance that the constructive pressure of no labels makes it a more thoughtful one or a more reasonable one where, we get real information out of these guys instead of just mudslinging?
Yeah. I mean, if that's, that would be a major contribution to the country if a no labels or third choice candidates could at least get these people to debate because we didn't see that last time with Trump Biden. But having that person that will show up, nobody has any excuses. They'd have to meet with that person. Maybe they won't debate each other, but they should be able to debate the third choice. So I think the public's got to be able to get their information and make a choice. And so our hope is we will push them out of their corners to get into the ring and be able to have these discussions in front of the public.
Do you think it's possible, Nancy, that let's say you don't have a candidate? Could you host a debate? Could No Labels host a debate and say, hey, we speak for the majority of Americans. Is there some role you could play like that in the fall of 24?
That's another option. That would be a great option. I mean, we just want the public to have choices, to get their information. If let's say we don't offer the ballot line, at least be able to get their information. And so if they'd have us, of course, that would be a great idea for this to do.
One question for you, Nancy. I think it was maybe about 13 years ago that you started No Labels. What's keeping you going? Like, just personally, this is obviously a labor of love, but it's a lot to take on. It's a lot of work. And just tell us a little bit about the personal experience you're having, doing this mission, because you've really committed your professional life to making No Labels successful.
So I came to Washington. I have always been, my entire career has always been in the center. Center of the Democratic Party, but 13 years ago understood there was a new center of center right, center left, common sense majority. So it's all I've ever done. It's just continuing. Everything I've done in my life has led to this. We all want to speak and live our truths. It seems so clear when we get out in the country. When we went to New Hampshire last week, I mean, it was the most people St. Anselm's has ever had in the 30 plus years, right? What you didn't see was there was 3 backup rooms with people filled in. The people want this. So if we were doing something that the people didn't want, I don't know if I could do this, but people they're not happy with the status quo. They understand there's a lot of shadiness that goes on in Washington. There's a lot of hypocrisy. There's people that are on the make and on the take. And they just want, they want peace brought back to this country. So, everybody does their life's work. I mean, being part of something larger than myself, being involved in politics, that's been my work. And this is just a continuation of everything I've ever done. And when the people stop wanting it is probably when we don't need to do this anymore.
Well, then you can celebrate. If people don't want you, it's because those parties have changed. They're serving some better food.
That would be great. Listen, we'd love nothing more than, this to be a wake-up call to the parties. I mean, it's not like any of us are salivating to do this, but if they can wake up, that would be a great thing and appeal to the common sense majority, and we go home. We don't need to do this. But, what's so fascinating is these groups are more interested in trying to, shut the choice down, the constitutional democratic choice of a ballot, instead of trying to figure out how do they speak the messages and try to offer to the public what they want.
Nancy, you have been building an organization, sort of one Republican, one Democrat at a time. You've created a unified House. Are your members taking some criticism for this? And next spring, if you decide to launch, would that really require a Democrat or a Republican? You're going to have to break, assuming someone comes from each of those parties for a unity ticket. Is you think someone's really going to be prepared to break with their historical party to join your ticket? Like, what's going on within your membership group? Do they feel pressured by all this?
Listen, we never calculated that the Problem Solvers Caucus would be leading this parade. You never get members, inside the Congress to lead parades. They follow what's going on outside. So it was never part of our calculation they would do that. We created that, we built that, but that really runs on its own. I mean, that group runs on its own, with or without us now. I mean, it really runs on its own. It's a wonderful thing. And it was never going to work without them becoming proprietary. So, that's not needed for the success of what we need to do. That's all I can say. And there's a lot of pressure. I mean, if you're a Democrat and you don't want to offend the groups, you don't want to, not have your money. So, you can't expect these people to do that. And there's a lot of pressure on the right as well. So that's part of the problem. But for us, it's not part of our calculation whether those folks come on. We want to speak directly to the people, and it's really going to come from the people in terms of the success of this.
Well, and we've seen Joe Lieberman talk about this, and even though it's projecting ahead a little bit, we've seen him comment to the effect of, if we get there, and if we're deciding to really launch, hey, we're going to look at all of America to try to find the best ticket to put together. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a career politician. It could be a business person. It could be a leader from some other segment of American life. I mean, that would be fascinating to see what you'd come up with. We need a list of the interview questions, Nancy. We want to start getting ahead on that.
Right.
See who we can scare up for you.
That's right. And that's going to be stage 2 of this. I mean, we had to get the ideas out. We had to provide more definition to, this new space, in this country, for the common sense majority. And then, the next staging is really figuring out, the casting call. I mean, who's interested? So, how do we start ginning up, interest in people willing to step forward here? Because there's no guarantees with anybody. And we really want to put out a wide net and see who's interested across this country to take this leap and serve the country in this manner.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. As we leave, anything our audience can or should be doing to be useful, helpful, encouraging, like what would you tell our audience about being supportive of your ideas?
Really, this is a movement. We want people to sign up at nolabels.org. We want them to join us. We want them to donate it to us. We want them to share it with their friends. And then we're going to be having much more specific calls to action in the weeks ahead. So to be on our list, to be able to do this as we keep growing this community. So I think signing up for now and trying to get their friends and family and neighbors signing up with us as well.
Well, and isn't it fair to say if someone signs up, it doesn't mean that they're going to vote for your candidate. It just means I'm a concerned citizen and I want more balance in our world and I want to stay informed.
Absolutely. And if people want to give more than the, sort of the low dollar amount, I'd say feel free to email me directly and we'll put you on a different list, Nancy@nolabels.org, and get you brought in. We have hundreds and hundreds of people all around this country. I mean, the good news is there's not just one person that's, this is not like George Soros or, something like that. There's hundreds and hundreds of people that support this at all levels. And we'd love them to get engaged in a variety of ways.
Well, Nancy and Ryan, we really appreciate you guys joining us. It's fantastic spending time with you. It's fascinating. It's going to change a gazillion more times between, now and Election Day. But please come back and join us anytime you like. We really enjoy it.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.